Hi everybody, this is Brian. We're going to go ahead and get started on some Bob Ross background trees. But first I need to make a mix of my Prussian blue and my cadmium yellow because I would like to mix my own nice rich green, and I can use some Bob Ross Sap Green inside that mixture to adjust my greens as I feel that I need to. So let's get started on that. I'm going to take a little bit of Prussian blue. Well, heck, let's just take the whole thing. There's not that much there. And I'm going to take a lot of this yellow too. Not all of it, but a lot of it. I'm going to mix that in there, and you're going to see that I'm going to mix a really rich, pretty green right off the bat. Bob would often use a Sap Green and a mountain mixture to get this, but I like the richness of the Bob Ross Prussian blue and the Bob Ross cadmium yellow together to make a really pretty green. Now be very careful. One thing I want to caution you about the use of the color Sap Green. Sap Green is a transparent green, so if you go straight Sap Green onto your canvas, you're going to have a wildly neon green, and you're not going to be happy because you're going to be able to see right through it into the background. So it's always nice to mix your Sap Green with other opaque colors like cadmium yellow, which is an opaque. So you can use cadmium yellow and some Sap Green to make also a really pretty green. Okay, so here I have this. I want to darken this just a little bit, just to knock down the chroma of the green or the color intensity of that. So I've added in just a small amount of mountain mix just to kind of dull that color down just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to put in some very distant background trees. And so I actually want these to be grayed down a little bit, so I'm going to split this pile in half, roughly. And I'm going to come over here and grab some titanium white, probably a little more than that. Get some titanium white. We're going to brighten this green up significantly. And when we do that, as things go off into the distance and they're going more toward the horizon, things get cooler and grayer in color. So if we take this mix that we just mixed and we add white to it, we're going to gray down that color, cool it down a little bit, and that'll push those trees back off in the distance a little bit more toward the mountain. Now, if you haven't seen this painting does look familiar to a lot of you who have been sticking with me through some of these videos. So if you haven't seen the videos that got us to this point in this particular painting, be sure to catch out our skies and water video and our Bob Ross clouds video. Plus, also then after that, go to the mountain video. We have 2 mountain videos here to show you how to get these mountains in just this way. And when you get those done, then you can come back and you can watch this video and get these background trees in. So what we're putting in here today is the background trees that go along the base of this mountain, okay? So we created some mist in our mountain videos, and that's kind of where we are as we start this new one. And I'm just going to put in a layer of distant hills with evergreen trees on the back of it. This is an incredibly simple procedure to do. It takes a 1-inch brush or a 2-inch brush in order to do this. I'm operating on a 12x16 canvas today, so I'm just going to opt for the 1-inch brush, which is the smaller of the Bob Ross larger brushes, okay? So since I've got this mixture, I've got these 2 piles right here. This doesn't take a ton of paint, but make sure that you do put enough paint on your brush. You know, a lot of times in class, I'm telling people, hey, you're using too much paint, or I'll also tell them, hey, you're not using enough paint. So you'll eventually just have to work with the paint enough that you get familiar with what you need to work with. Okay, so in order to load my brush, I've got my brush standing up with the handle pointing skyward. I'm going to rotate that down to about a 45-degree angle, and I'm just going to kind of tap into this lighter green mixture on one side of my brush. Kind of tap, 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 and you can even give it a little push if you want. And that'll load the bristles at the end. And really, seriously, all we need to do this, and for some reason this is a mystery sometimes when people are in class, they don't see the way that I'm holding the brush, okay? So I'm holding the brush at a slightly tilted cant so that when my brush touches the canvas, you kind of get a straighter edge on the top of your bristles as they kind of push together. If you go at it like this, you're probably wanting to stroke down on the canvas, and then trust me, you've got a mess on your hands. So I've got my brush loaded on one side, and I'm just going to come up here and I can kind of shape the hills as I want them. One thing that you do have to be concerned about is that you don't want to kill all the mist that you created in here. So operate inside that mist and leave a little mist above the tops of your trees. And I'll show you what that looks like here. If you don't do that, it'll look like your your trees are just right at the base of that mountain. And that's not the look you want. The impression that we're trying to give here is that we have distance between the base of the mountain and before our trees start. So in order to do this, I'm just going to put them in a very simple pattern, just all the way across the canvas, just to make it easy for you to see. You'll have a lot more time to see. So I'm just going to start anywhere that I want, and I'm just going to tap and come directly off. Tap, 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 tap. See, I'm just tapping. I'm not stroking the canvas at all. okay? And I can change my brush to make different shapes as I move along, okay? Do this how you like, and see how I've got some of this mist that is that's hanging out above my treetops. That's important, as we discussed earlier, to keep. I'm just continually loading my brush here, nothing new. I'm not showing you anything new here. Let me just get these in. So that gets our tops in, right? So if you want to, you can either leave them thin like this if you're wanting to create super distant trees, or me, I just want to kind of flush these out a little bit so they're just a little bigger. I don't want them just that tiny little band. Make them look more like a more significant hill. That also gives the impression when you do this that they are a little closer to you than those mountains. So that really pushes those mountains way back off into the distance when you put these trees in here. So this is just step one of the trees. These are not finished. Let me show you kind of how to finish these off. I'm just going to put that in, nice little narrow band. And I think that's probably good enough for that lesson. You see I'm just tapping and coming off, tap, 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 but I'm leaving enough paint on my brush that it comes off on that canvas. I'm gonna wipe off that excess paint out of that brush, and I'm actually gonna use the cleaner side of the brush. So I've got the dirtier side that I just applied it with. I've got a cleaner side over here. And the final, well, the second step, not the final step, but the second step to complete these is you can rotate your brush upward so that we're just gonna use the ends of the bristles of the cleaner side of the brush. And we're just gonna come up here and we're gonna, well, let me demonstrate this way. We're gonna kind of flick up, let me get that thumb out of the way, flick up and away. So up and away from the canvas like this, but only very small strokes upward, okay? You don't want big old giant trees way off in the distance. It won't look right. So I'm just kind of pulling up and away, maybe 1/8 of an inch, just at the tops. And that'll kind of pull some tree tops skyward. It's very important that you do these skyward instead of at an angle. If they go at an angle, they look more like grasses. And you don't want these to look like grasses. You want them to look like big old treetops. Now you'll get the feel of this as you move along and you're working with the amount of paint that you have on your canvas. And then you can adjust the pressure as you see fit. But start with a lighter touch until you can see how your paint is going to move, if at all. Sometimes you don't have enough of paint to allow it to move. This actually is pretty perfect amount of paint, so I'm pretty pleased with this. Pretty pleased with it, okay? So, all right, so that's all you have to do. Now you can do this also, you can put kind of little upward strokes through the remainder of your paint, but you're not gonna see them as distinctly as you can against the mountain, because obviously you're pulling up paint in here just to give it a little texture. It's all roughly the same color in that case. Okay, so I'm wiping off that excess paint out of that brush now. And the final step to do this, it depends on what you're gonna do. I mean, if you're gonna put something else in front of this, which we are, but if you were not, then you could just, if you had the lake here like we have in the video, from the previous videos, you could just pull this downward and then we can create some reflections in the back. But in this case, because I want something to go in front of them, what I'd like to do is what Bob would always do, is to create a little misty area down at the base here. Just like we did with the mountains, we're gonna do it in a similar way. We're gonna use just that top corner of that brush again. And we're gonna tap pretty hard at the base of this mountain, and that's gonna kind of disperse some of this paint, kind of destroy a little bit of it. And that's gonna help us create a little bit of a misty area here as well, okay? So let's just kind of spread that. I'm gonna wipe it out, that excess paint out of this brush. Again, I like to keep my brushes pretty clean, and then I can just pull upward at the base of this just to kind of give it a little bit of make a little misty area. And that's also going to take out those tap marks that I just put in there. And much in a similar way that it did for the mountains, it's going to give me a little bit of a misty area in order to lay a lighter color area. I'm just brushing out some of these little faces down here with the little crisscross strokes. That's going to give me a little bit of an advantage when I get in here to put in this next line of closer trees. Gosh, those look so nice. I think I'm gonna change what I was gonna do in the plan. So let's just Let's use that second darker color just to put in another row of these. I mean, why not, right? I mean, we're here, the color's mixed. So I'm gonna go back into this darker. This is the color we used the first time, and I'm gonna come into this darker color because this next line of trees will be closer to us. So let me flatten that out just a little bit, just to make it a little bit easier to get my brush into. You always wanna try not to go in this large pile of paint. I'm gonna load the same side of my brush, and you should see this be significantly darker, which will imply that these are closer to us. So I'll just kind of start up in here, maybe this line of trees is going this way. Maybe we've got some crazier hills going on in the background. So now we've got these much darker, closer trees kind of moving down toward that lake. Maybe they're sitting right on the edge, who knows? Here, let's bring a line down this way. Okay. All right. And see, we've got some of that little misty area above these trees as well, and that really does help with that contrast a lot. So just remember, try not to put these trees right on top of those other ones, or they just won't work. They won't look right. I mean, you may not know what is wrong, but you'll know something's wrong. You may not know the specifics of what is wrong, but it'll be wrong and it'll look funny to you. So this is just another little small band of trees. Here, I want to make these a little bit thicker too, because these need to be about as tall as those, unless they're just shrubs or something. So, but we'll make them into trees. We'll want them to be a little bigger. Okay. All right. Here, let's give ourselves a little shape to this hill coming down. And leave all those variations in the color. The light is going to hit a little differently in places, so that kind of helps you with your color contrast. Makes it look just a little more believable. Okay, so that's simple enough. I mean, we're not trying to be complicated here. We're trying to show you the absolute basics of how to do your mountain. So again, we're going to come up to the top of this and we're going to pull this upward. Okay. I'll pull it upward and away from our canvas so that they look a little more like treetops. All right. Not too much darker because they're pretty close to each other, but there's enough of a difference that you can tell that these are a little darker. And what we're really talking about is the difference in value, which is the lightness or darkness in relation to a grayscale. And we could talk more on that in our more advanced classes and videos that we teach. We teach an enormous amount of color theory in our advanced courses, but hey, in the Bob Ross world, we're looking for pretty paintings as quickly as we can get them done, and there's nothing wrong with that, okay? If you feel like you want to advance on and learn a little bit more about art itself and the whys of things, the why, then you can look for our other non-Bob Ross videos specifically to learn your other things. Or you can attend a class with us because we teach classes all around the nation, and you can look at our schedule and you can see where we are. So hopefully we'll be in your area at some point. And if not, just be certain to enjoy us here on our video channels. And I'm just, again, blending out the bottom of it. What I'm really kind of doing here is I'm kind of shaping some land coming downward toward that lake. So we're not going to do these reflected into the water this time. We're just going to kind of come down. In our next video, we'll come down to a gentle bank. But I am going to put another line of trees in here for you in the next part of this video. So stand by for that, because we'll show you another way to do trees that'll kind of complement these when we come back. Now that we have that in, why don't we move forward in the painting, which means we're going to get a little bit darker, and then we're going to put in some little taller evergreen trees, because clearly this is an evergreen area, probably not a lot of deciduous trees this high, in the landscape. So let's come forward. As we work forward, we'll be able to see a little bit more detail. So we want to put in another one of Bob's kind of popular tree types. So here what we're going to do is we're going to mix Prussian blue, cadmium yellow, and a little bit of sap green, and then we're also going to add in a little bit of the mountain mix. The reason why I chose the mountain mix is, although mountain mix did not exist when Bob was doing the episodes, it's his standard mix when he would do the background of the mountains. I like to put a little mountain mix in there to keep it darker as I'm moving forward in the painting, and also because since I've already used the mountain mix in other portions of the painting, it's a nice way to keep color harmony going. So I will mix my green first using Prussian blue and cadmium yellow, so like we did for the other trees. Okay, and this will be a little darker, I think, than we had before. I used a little more Prussian blue, a little less of the cadmium yellow in here. And then I'm going to add just a touch of sap green because, Bob used it a lot, and I like using it as a mixing color. Earlier in the video, we talked about only using sap green as a mixing color, not as a primary color going in, because it's transparent and it'll appear neon against your white or light gray canvas, and you don't want that. I'm also then going to add this mountain mix in here to darken things up a little bit. Okay, so I added, I don't know, my whole pile of mountain mix, which wasn't much, maybe, about a peanut M&M size amount. All right, so that's going to get things dark, but it is going to have a little bit of a green hue to it. So you will see that as we move forward in the painting here and get these trees in. Okay, so for this particular portion or type of trees, we're going to go to our number 6 fan brush. You can use a number 3 fan brush if that's what you've got, or any other size fan brush that you have. It is kind of nice though if you use a natural bristle brush. Now I am a fan of synthetic brushes, all right? I know Bob was not, but I am a fan of synthetic brushes. However, I will tell you that in most cases in the Bob Ross method, a good natural bristle brush does perform a little bit better. This is actually one of those cases. I actually do not use synthetic fans except for one little teeny tiny one, not in the Bob Ross method, but when I'm doing traditional oil painting, and I really only use that as a blender for the tiniest little edges. So a good China board bristle brush, which is what this is, will do the trick for you much better than any other brush probably out there. Okay, so to load the brush, we're gonna just load both sides of this brush pretty heavily with paint and pulling in on both sides, just at the ends of the bristles of the brush. You don't need a ton of paint throughout the rest of the brush, because you're really only gonna use the ends of the bristles of the brush for this particular technique. What we're going to do is we're going to put a round of background trees up here, and I'm going to operate mostly in this little misty area here, but I'm going to touch into some of this row of trees back there. Then what we do is we take our bristles, now that they're loaded, and we rotate our handle up just a little bit so that we use just the top half of this brush. You know that there's a little bit of a rounded end to these bristles, so we just want to use the top half of the brush, and then we run out of paint, we can flip our brush over, do the same thing. All right, but what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of tap downward. We're going to touch the canvas and we're going to tap downward, and it'll slide just a little bit on its own, so don't feel like you've got to slide that brush down there. That won't work for you very well. Okay, so here we go. Rotate that upward, come up here, and very seriously just knock it down. Tap, 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 tap. It looks like a real big mess right now, but we're going to reflect these into the water in just a little bit. What you got to be on the lookout for is these little voided areas right here. So it'll start to make your painting look like fence posts, and you don't want that to happen. When that happens, just come up here and fill those in. Okay, just fill in the bottom halves of those, just like this. All right, and make sure your paintbrush is loaded with paint, because otherwise you'll be trying to eke out an extra tree when you really shouldn't. Okay, and when your paint starts getting all spread out and flat like mine is right here, do yourself a frustration favor and scoop it back up and put it back into a pile. I should have done that before I started, but that's a great lesson to teach you right off the bat, and that way you can get right into that paint and load your paintbrush and get right back to work. Otherwise, you're going to be trying to spread that paint all over the place, and you're just going to be frustrated. As Bob would say, you'd be in agony city. That was no fun for anyone. it's not a good place to visit. Agony City, you know. Ba-dum-bum. All right. And that's all there is to these. I mean, you can do as many or as few of these as you want. Now that we have these very rough looking background trees that are a little closer put into us, let's take you know, a moment to kind of cut off some of these to clean up some of this base area. That'll put some reflections down into our water. We don't want to overthink this too much. What you essentially want to do is give yourself a nice overhand grip on your brush, show it who's boss, right? And then just rotate your handle downward toward the floor so that you get a nice knife edge when you touch the canvas. And we're gonna cut off the bottoms of our trees, and we're just gonna pull them directly straight downward, okay? It's very important that they go downward, otherwise your reflections really just won't look right. So I'm just kind of cutting off the bottoms of these trees, pulling them down into the water to create a nice looking little reflection. All right, don't pull down too far either, because it's not super realistic, you know, for you to have tiny little trees here, but then 30-foot trees going down here. So just be aware of how far down you're pulling these, and take your time. I mean, we're not in a rush here. And this will form the back edge of your lake. All right, and I'm taking a lot more time to do this than Bob did on the episodes. He only had 27 minutes to complete his whole painting, but we're taking our little sweet time so that you don't feel a little rushed and overworked. And besides that, you can start and stop this video as many times as you want, and that's fine. I hope that you do. All right, so now we've got things pulled directly downward. I'm wiping off the excess paint out of this brush. So now I'm gonna just pull it directly sideways, and notice that I'm using the sides of the bristles of my brush, so I'm rotating my brush so it's almost parallel to the canvas, and I'm just barely, with no downward pressure, just pulling a little bit of this paint sideways just to give it a little bit of a shimmer, and that will kind of complete the illusion of reflections. And you may need, if you got a little drag here and there like I do, and that's natural just from bringing a brush through wet paint, you can just pull it back downward and very gently pull it across, and you should be all set. Well, so now that's 2 ways for you to do Bob's most common background evergreen trees. I hope that's been helpful for you. Next up will be our larger foreground evergreen trees, so I hope that you join us for that video when it comes out. Thanks so much.